Representative Mike Pitts. You've just been out to the legislative breakfast this morning. You did?
I did.
And was breakfast good?
It was.
It was?
It was. I didn't overeat, but the food was good.
The food was good. Well, that's great. Well, you know, there's been a lot going on down there at the State House these last 2 weeks. I think the latest thing was this $500 million bond issue that you're on the committee for the House
Ways and Means.
Ways and Means, and y'all were in favor of this, and Governor Haley is against it. What's going on?
Well, I was one of the sponsors.
You were one of the sponsors.
Yes, along with the other budget sub-chairs. So, and it's not quite 500 million. It's 497 million to be exact.
Well, you want to round it up 3 million?
Well, you got to leave some room for the Senate.
Okay, all right. Well, what is the issue? I mean, it looks like you're addressing higher education, technical schools, water and sewer projects, deferred maintenance at state-owned buildings, parks, and an armory, and $50 million for K through 12 education. What is the governor? Why is she so against it? I hear she says we're just putting it on a credit card and acting like Washington down here in South Carolina.
Well, I have no idea where the governor's coming from on this particular issue. My personal perception is that she is now in gear for a national platform and
Her next political office?
her next political office, whatever that is. I have no clue what that might be, but every indication is it's federal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's apparent that her method is going to be use the General Assembly as a whipping post to garner support to go there. And truth and facts do not have to be a part of that equation.
Well, do we have the money like she says we do?
No, we do not. If we did, we wouldn't have buildings that had been neglected for 15 years and other infrastructure that had been neglected for 15 years. You do a bond bill to take care of those, same as you would in a private home or a private business.
To make improvements.
Well, you use the bank or your,
When you can use the bank, yeah.
or your credit card.
Right.
You make a loan one way or the other to buy a house, to do renovations to a home, to purchase a vehicle. You don't just go out and pay cash. Very few people can. Some do, but very few can. In the state's budget, bonding is the way that you approach that. And in 2013, she was supportive of a bond. Now, all of a sudden, it's Washingtonite to do that. I call it Potomac fever. She's got Potomac fever. She's got Washington in her sights. But the real issue, Ann, is the committee sent out a balanced budget within our means, and all of our trust funds and all of our reserve funds are paid full, and the bond issue is well below our debt limit. So it would not change our credit rating. The current bond that was done in '98 comes off next year. So we would not be increasing the debt service at all. We would simply be continuing the same debt service that we currently have. We're not creating a deficit. We're not creating deficit spending. We're simply taking care of the state's infrastructure needs the way we're supposed to with a bond. And as the list you read, this committee is a very conservative committee. The sub-chairs are extremely conservative, fiscal conservatives by nature. And the projects that you see on there are from three basic categories: law enforcement, public safety, infrastructure, or education needs. Now, let's look at the infrastructure. Some of that money goes to building infrastructure. I'm not talking about highway infrastructure, totally separate issue. But this goes to repair university buildings, the tech schools, buildings that have to have service and maintenance done to them that we can't take out of the general fund budget because it's high expenditure. The second part of that equation is educating a workforce. Giving the devil her dues, Haley's done an excellent job. The governor's done an excellent job of recruiting industry to the state. She and her director of commerce, Bobby Hitt, have brought industry after industry into the state.
Sure.
We have to train our workforce to work in those industries. Many of them have specific need training. Just a regular tech degree in machine and tool or anything like that is not what they're
Sure.
looking for.
Piedmont Tech is constantly doing training for industries, particularly up the road, Simpsonville.
Exactly, and they have a center in northern Lawrence County that Piedmont Tech built specifically for that purpose.
Exactly.
That center is training about a third of the needed employees at this time for those companies that are currently here and expanding. And we have others looking at our area of the world that are going to have to be trained. With that in mind, if we're going to keep pace with the industry coming in that the governor is recruiting, we've got to put the facilities in place to train those people.
You know, one of the questions I think is, can we train enough people? I have heard through the grapevine that there's just not enough people that we can train even with these programs in place.
Well, it's complex. And yes, we can train enough people. We can't do it right away. We have to have the facilities in place. We have to have the infrastructure in place. And we have to have a coordinated effort between our high schools and our tech schools to train the people.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be guided in that direction, they being the students that are willing to work in industry or to work in trades, have to be guided in that direction mid-course of high school if we want to accelerate and train that level of employees. Now, are we headed in that direction? Yes, we are. Ready SC and a variety of other programs that the current General Assembly's put in place in the last 5 years is working well. But we have to fund those programs, and a coordinated part of this bond bill, a huge part of this bond bill, is for those efforts, which Governor Haley supports. So how can you support on one hand the programs and then not support the funding necessary on the other hand? That's sort of contradictory.
I think it's very contradictory.
Well,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I started to say it's an oxymoron, but I am going to stop short of saying that the governor's hypocritical on this issue.
Well, how can she even go on bringing more industry in if we cannot get our people trained and have the facilities to do that?
She can't legitimately. And, you know, Ann, I watch people run for higher office out of the General Assembly, out of the House of Representatives,
Mm-hmm.
and I've watched people's voting record of a decade suddenly change and go haywire, trying to posture and position for a different office that they are targeting. I've come to the conclusion that you should not be able to run for office while holding office.
And I think that's probably true, yes.
Then I wouldn't have to listen to long speeches about stuff that has no relevance, so people can get a sound bite for a commercial to be run later.
Well, you've got a point. I mean, we see it on all stages, not just here in South Carolina, across the country.
Absolutely. And
Look at the presidential thing right now that's going on, from Jeb Bush to Perry to Christie. They're all out there.
And if you go back and you research right now, and I challenge people to do this, to go back and look at what the governor has said and done for the last 5 years, and then watch the changes over for the next 16 months or so, and how the rhetoric will change. The presentation won't change because she's very good at presentation.
Mhm.
But the substance of what she's saying, like the bond bill, I will veto the bond bill. It's Washingtonite, while in 2013 she was promoting a bond bill.
Okay, so you're in favor of this. A couple of the things that were in that: 146 million for higher education building, 25 million for the University of South Carolina, and then 94 million for technical schools, including 35 million for an aerospace center at Trident Technical College to benefit Boeing.
That was part of the agreement with Boeing when they came here, was to be able to provide the service or provide the facilities for them to train their workers.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have that capability. And in order to have that aerospace industry, we had to be able to train the employees, just like we were talking about before. So that was part of the original agreement.
So at this point, we don't have a place to train their employees?
Not to the level that we need.
Okay.
Plus, you have, without saying too much, expansion and other industry, aeronautical industry, aero engineering, looking at South Carolina. So if we are going to be on the cutting edge, stay on the cutting edge, then we're going to have to put the infrastructure in place to do that. Again, the bond bill is the way to do it. It doesn't just service that. Law enforcement, that comes under the committee that I chair. You'll find in that bond bill $12 million to build a new lab for SLED headquarters. The one we've got is antiquated and
very outdated.
And very outdated and very crowded. And parts of it is cost prohibitive to try to maintain the building. So at some point it's time to replace a building. Now, $12 million for a new lab not only will service SLED, it will service the local governments as well, the police departments, sheriff's departments,
coroner's office.
Coroner's
yes.
office.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things go to SLED. So the new lab would be able to keep pace with that and give a higher turnaround, a faster turnaround.
Much more efficient.
Much more efficient. The second thing that's in there is a training facility, an advanced training facility. Currently, we're having to use the basic training academy for both basic and advanced training, and it's two different animals. You need a different structure, a different setup to train advanced as opposed to training basic trainees. Plus, the wait for law enforcement to get their people into advanced training because of space available is long.
It's a long time.
And
I've heard that.
And another part of the equation that's not been brought up until I brought it up in the budget committee over this bill is, if society continues to stick its head in the sand where law enforcement's concerned and not realize what law enforcement is put there for, and that's to protect the public, just putting it bluntly, if we continue to beat up on police officers for doing their damn job, the turnover rate is going to be even higher. So basic training of citizens to become police officers is going to become a much more rapid cycle. Who in their right mind at the current time wants to be a police officer?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to be one.
I'm serious.
I know you were, but
I was. But I don't recommend kids doing it today because it's a gotcha system. Everybody has a cell phone camera and everybody wants to get a cop on tape. And they don't want to get the whole picture. They only want to get a portion of it.
I think it would be horrible to be a cop and be standing there trying to make an instantaneous decision, have your training wanting to kick in, but on the flip side, worried about the consequences.
Well, what you're going to have is officers putting themselves in jeopardy when they shouldn't have to for that very reason.
Sure.
Your training has to be your instinct, because if you wait to make a decision, you don't get to make a decision.
You don't survive, right.
Quite often, that's the case. And my point being that guys that go into law enforcement always have gone in and 2 to 3 years or less, they figure out this is just not for me. So it's been about a 30% ratio of loss prior to 5 years. So you had about a 30% to 40% of having to train new officers. That's going to be much higher in the future. So my point being, this advanced training facility is necessary not just for training, but to relieve the pressure on the basic training facility. Those are two things in law enforcement alone that are in this budget to the tune of $22 million. So I think the governor's being hypocritical on being opposed to the bond bill.
So how do you think, let's see, this was in the House. Does it go to the Senate now?
Well, it's not passed the House floor yet.
Okay.
It goes, the budget and the bond bill both go to the House floor next week.
Okay. Do you expect it'll pass the House?
I think the bond bill and the budget both will pass the House. Will it be in the absolute fashion that it is now? I don't know. Probably not. Some changes will be made in different places. I don't know how you can make many changes to this particular bond bill for the simple reason that staying below our bonded debt service could increase another $250 million on this bond bill and still stay well within those limits. It's got to also pass the Senate. So I'm sure that the Senate chairman over there have things that
they would like to see.
They have priorities that not necessarily my priorities. So as the system works, it will change some. It could go up, but again, it will stay below the current debt service, in my opinion.
Will the governor veto it?
Who knows?
I mean, if it passes the House and the Senate, whatever version that it ends up when it goes to her desk.
She ran it and raved against the House for putting it in the first place, but again, she's in political mode, and who knows what she'll do at this point. I would anticipate her vetoing it. And if she does, she's saying we don't want the infrastructure. Well, if you go back to her version of the transportation bill, you got 4 versions of the transportation bill in the House now, and her version is one of them. If you went to her version of the transportation bill, it would do the exact same thing that the recession of '08 did to the general fund budget. Meaning it cuts $1.8 billion out of the...
Oh, by the tax, reducing the tax
Correct.
credits and charging 10 cents a gallon.
Correct.
Yeah.
She says it has to be revenue neutral. Well, revenue neutral is exactly where we are today.
There doesn't seem to be much of an advantage then, does there?
No.
I mean, in my business mind here.
Well, there's a political advantage of being able to say we're reducing the income tax while increasing the gas tax.
Aren't those really two separate issues?
They are two separate issues.
I mean, the income tax needs to be addressed, and, you know, I've talked to several that say I don't see any will to go ahead and redo our whole income tax structure, but that was something that was necessary.
Well,
and then we've got the gas or the roads.
It's apples and oranges. It really is. And she said that if it's not revenue neutral, it will veto. She will veto it. Well, revenue neutral, as I stated, is where we are today. If you go revenue neutral with her plan, you're reducing the general fund budget $1.8 billion. I mean $1.2 billion. That's exactly what happened to us in '08, and we lost over 10,000 positions of a 70,000 employee workforce. So in '08, 1.2 billion cut out of funds, and you saw the effects. Law enforcement's still not recovered from those effects. And you want to do it again? I would have been less critical of the governor had she. I would have not been critical of the governor had she simply said, education and health care is 81% of the budget. Law enforcement is 11% of the budget. Add those two together, I've got 92% of the budget. So I'm going to cut proportionately those percentages to get the $1.2 billion I need. that would have been factual. And I would have said, okay, I'll take a look at that. Where are we going to cut? But that's not, that doesn't play the political game.
That's unfortunate. You know, it's just like I never understood why she was all the way through the election. We're not going to add any gas tax, and then she comes out after the first of the year. Yes, we're adding a gas tax, and then on the backside, we'll make it revenue neutral.
Well, revenue neutral, and I have one of those 4 bills we're talking about. I dropped it last week. Revenue neutral, if it's got to be revenue neutral, I don't see doing it on the income tax. I don't get questioned on state income tax. When I hear people complaining about income tax, it's the 40% federal and FICA they pay. It's not the state's income tax. But what do I hear on the state level? Income tax. Property tax. That's
Correct.
What I hear. So my bill takes the 10.5% corporate income tax and drops it to 6% to match other income tax. Property tax. Correct. How would that help? It takes a load off small business. This bill, if you're going to do it revenue neutral, that would truly help small business. It would truly help them produce more jobs. Doesn't take a huge amount of money back into their revenue stream to give them the incentive to produce another job.
Sure.
And small business is the backbone of the state's industry to begin with.
So, but that's on taxes, income tax. That doesn't have to do with the roads.
No.
And they're 2 separate issues.
It's absolutely 2 separate issues. And North Carolina just did a revenue neutral plan 2 years ago. They are $300 million in deficit this year.
300 million.
300 million in deficit this year.
So what is the answer on the roads? I mean, you know, there's all kinds of committees. I mean, I've had on the air with me, I had Jerry Timmons, and I know the Chamber has had a speaker from Davis and Floyd about all the issues, and just getting a project to get done is a big issue.
3 issues.
Okay.
The first is streamline the bureaucracy that they have to deal with, both DHEC and engineering. Streamline those bureaucracies. That can be done by the legislature. The second thing is there's not enough revenue coming in on the gas tax to fix the problem. I stated that on this show 2 or 3 years ago.
Yep, you did.
That the revenue stream was not adequate to do what was necessary. And the federal monies, the state has been almost exclusively dependent on federal monies to take care of our roads. Well, there's 2 problems there. One is the same thing that's reducing state revenue on the gas tax is reducing federal revenue on the gas tax. And that is, the better gas mileage cars get, the fewer gallons people buy.
Exactly. So
you're having a reduction in federal monies that this state is dependent on for roads. At the same time, match money
is reducing.
The revenue stream is not there. The natural revenue stream is what some people don't want to hear, and that's a user fee. That's a gas tax. That's
Correct.
what it is. It's a user fee. If you don't buy gas, you don't pay the fee.
Correct.
If you really want to fix the roads and do it legitimately the way it should be done, it would be a gas tax. That's un-Republican to say a tax should be increased. But that's the truth. That particular tax is designed to repair, maintain, and build new roads. That's what it's in place for. Hasn't been increased in decades. If you are going to fix the roads the way that it should be done, by the avenue it should be done, it would be a gas tax increase. Now, with that said, before I vote on that, I want to see efficiency in DOT. I do not see efficiency in DOT in how they currently use monies. And I have researched an audit that was done on DOT in '04, one in 2010.
Okay.
I do not believe they've made corrections that were uncovered in '04 and 2010. So this coming week, I will be doing a request for legislative audit of DOT for a specific thing. One is contracting.
Okay.
2 is duplication and engineering. 3 is in-house construction or reconstruction. They are doing resurfacing projects in-house that are costing more than it would to contract them out because they don't last. They have to go back and do them every year.
So they're making work.
They're making work.
Literally.
And that's happening right here in Greenwood and Lawrence counties in my district, in Ann Park's district, Shannon Riley's district, and there by the 2 senators' districts. And that's inefficiency with money itself. So, 3 things: streamline bureaucracy and doing away with the commission and putting it directly on the governor. I don't see that as the answer either. I've not.
Would it have been your answer though? Has it changed? Has it changed?
No, it has not changed.
Okay, just asking.
And the reason is I haven't seen good response from agencies under her control in the past. And she has a tendency to go out of state and find somebody to put in charge of our state agencies, and I don't think that worked real well at DSS, DHHS, maybe even DHEC, although Catherine Templeton in a lot of ways I thought did a good job with an agency that's way too large. But she couldn't get her last appointee through the Senate certified, so no, I'm not in favor at this time putting DOT directly under her control. But we have to get that bureaucratic efficiency in place. I think duplication of engineering is one of the real ones, and contractual, several things about how contracts are done and awarded is one. But efficiency of how they spend their money internally is one of the biggest things I want to see, and that's why I want to see this audit done. But the bottom line is, it's going to take more money to fix the roads. The gas tax is the obvious place to go. That's what it's designed for.
How much of a gas tax would we need, though, Mike?
It's estimated between 6 and 10 cents. And if you're asking what would it take to generate what is needed at this point, 10 cents. And you could sunset that, because over the course of 5 years, that would get us up to speed, and then it would not take as much. So you could sunset that and revisit it in 5 years would be
5 years.
That would be the way I would want to look at it. People say once tax is on, it never comes off.
It did come off our 1 cent sales tax here in Greenwood.
Well, there's a way to sunset it and make it come off here too, and that would be to put it before the people to vote. In 5 years, have we done what you wanted us to do? If we have not, if this has not provided the service that you thought it was, and you want this tax to come back off, let the people take it off. And that probably would keep legislators from trying to shift that money and put it somewhere else. And
that was going to be my next question. Yes.
And I have no objection to that. One legislator told me that means that you're circumventing the process and not willing to make the hard decision. No, I think I'm willing to make the hard decision by saying a gas tax is the way that we need to go to make this happen at this point in time.
It's one of the least painful ways, isn't it, really?
Well, 30% of the people buying gas in this state are not from this state, but they're using our roads.
Sure.
They come from North Carolina going down to Florida. We have a lot of folks from New York and New Jersey that visit Florida every year, come right down I-95.
Sure.
I-85 the same way. So 30% of those folks visiting our beaches, visiting our mountains, and traveling through our state would be paying for our roads, and they are using them, so they should be paying for them. Another thing, when I was talking about the federal funds, only 40% of our roads qualify for federal monies. So if the state's not putting money in, then our state roads are being neglected, and that's pretty obvious.
Well, that's we're the fourth largest state road system in the country, aren't we?
Yeah, and that goes back to a good old boy political system.
When they did that, right?
Yeah, people want to call the current system good old boy system. If you want to see, just research a little bit and see the time, the context of our road system, and that'll tell you a lot. Back at that point in time, the delegation controlled county funding.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to '76 and the formation of the Home Rule Act,
Mm-hmm.
the senator of each county. At that point in time, you had one senator per county, 46 senators. That was prior to the Voting Rights Act.
Okay.
The senator controlled who got roads paved and where roads were paved to. So you can go back and look. If you go back and research when a road was built,
Mm-hmm.
it will be just prior to or just pre or post election for that particular senator.
Wow. Okay.
That's why we have the number of roads we have going everywhere.
Sure. And that's where one of the biggest problems
If you go to a western state, they are gridded, and you're not traveling parallel to a road, a rural road that's a quarter of a mile from another road that you're traveling parallel to.
Okay, so what do you think the possibilities of something happening this year on that? If you're talking about an audit, you're talking about a good length of time, aren't you?
Well, the audit can be done during both processes can run in conjunction.
Simultaneously.
Yes.
Okay, but are we looking at something to be done in this legislature on, you said you're introducing a bill, but on what to do about the roads?
I think we better.
I think we better too, but.
Do I see it happening? No, I don't. And it's because there are too many people with too many different ideas of how to do it. And the governor has flatly stated if it's not revenue neutral, she'll veto it. So some of the perception or conception is, why push a bill through that you know is going to be vetoed? And revenue neutral won't fix the problem.
Correct.
It would fix the road problem, but it will create a
Another
totally
problem.
separate problem. Yes, and that's underfunding education, underfunding healthcare, and surely underfunding law enforcement.
Okay. Well, God, it sounds real positive down there, Mike.
Well, it is positive. The debate is going on, and it's a debate that should have been going on a decade ago. So it is positive. And generally, on an issue like this, we find our way to make it work. But the problem, the flip side is government runs slow. And in most cases, that's a good thing.
That's true. Otherwise, something could just slide right through, and then people could be going, uh-oh, we shouldn't have done it that way.
That's exactly right. Obamacare might be something that comes to mind.
Might be something that comes to mind. All right, well, we've covered a lot of issues. One of the local issues that is on a lot of people's mind is there is a resolution down there in the House, also one that is going through the Senate, about the monument, the resolution to be able to change the plaques. Can you give us an update as to where it is, and do you think it's going to come to the floor this session?
Where it is now,
That's Ann Parks, part of it.
Representative Ann Parks filed a resolution, and it went to House invitations. Senator Floyd Nicholson filed resolution in the Senate, and it is in Senate Judiciary at this time, I believe.
Okay. And what does that mean as far as the House? Let's talk about Ann Parks. It's in invitations. Will that be moving to the floor?
I can't say whether it will or not. What I can say is there's a lot of concern. It is not a local bill, as one would think, because it is a local issue. It does have statewide implication.
Because it's just to change the monument here in Greenwood.
But it would set precedent on the entire Heritage Act. And one of the other things is it takes a 2/3 vote of both bodies to pass any change of any kind to the Heritage Act. So will it come to the floor? I can't say yes or no. I can say that there's a lot of stir over the issue. There's rumors. As a matter of fact, Ann asked me if I had heard some last week of people trying to tie Tillman Hall, the Tillman Hall issue, and other issues to it being this resolution, if it does come to the floor. And there's quite a bit of concern that if it does come to the floor, it would become the flag debate, quote unquote, all over again, which was a 4-year debate in its own.
So that would turn into something that wouldn't be resolved this session, possibly next session, and could take a long time.
I would say so. And if it came to, if that particular issue came to the floor, it is much more, it's much larger and wider ranging than just the monument in Greenwood.
Okay. So, but that is where that is at. So that is in invitations. What's invitations? Just out of curiosity, I don't know what invitations. Is it an invitation to bring it to the floor?
Yeah, basically, it's just like any other subcommittee, except that resolutions go there. Resolution is not a bill in itself. It's a different type document. So invitations is designed to handle resolutions. Now, very few resolutions have the impact that this particular resolution could. Most resolutions are recognizing Greenwood's football team for winning a state championship and those kind of things. Very few resolutions come through that have direct change to statute impact.
Or one that you're going to be doing on Gage Cervenka when he wins the wrestling heavyweight 4 years in a row.
Correct.
Yeah. Now that would be a huge resolution for Gage Cervenka. That's also that was Emerald, graduating from Emerald.
But
that's what a normal resolution is.
That's what a normal resolution is, and basically that resolution is a rubber stamp that comes straight directly to the floor. The committee just sends it straight out. But sometimes they do land with a resolution that does have impact and does have the ability to alter statute, and then it becomes a totally separate animal.
Now, when this resolution started, was there some thought that it could just be voted on by the delegation from the local area?
I think some thought that, and when Ann asked me to sign on, I told her I had reservation because I wanted to know for sure if it was would have statewide implication. My line of thought was that this is not just going to be a local bill. This is going to be statewide because of the impact it could have. And yes, there was reservation. But I think, and I haven't discussed this with Ann, but I think Ann probably thought in the beginning that it could be just local legislation.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? Boy, we've had quite a conversation this morning.
We always do, Ann.
We always do. That's right. Well, listen, next week's going to be another week down there at the State House, huh?
Next week is, well, this coming week won't be quite as heavy, but the following week's budget week on the floor, so it will be a long week.
Long week. Yeah, I think we saw one of your tweets that We didn't even talk about South Carolina State, but I think we saw one of your tweets when you were all discussing South Carolina State, and it said, "I wish we could get some dinner here," or it was on Facebook or something. We saw that tweet.
It was. I used a Southern term. I said supper.
Supper, right? Exactly.
But that was about 7:30 at night, and we had worked through lunch on the South Carolina State issue, and I was getting hungry about that time.
Sure.
I could probably live off stored fat a while, but I don't like to.
Nobody does, I don't think. Speaking of South Carolina State, real quick, what do you think? Are we going to be able to save it?
I think it would be in the best interest of the state if we can save it. I don't know that if it's too far over the cliff to save at this point. We are making every effort to. A lot of people say just shut it down, but that's more complex than you think. We would then absorb all of the debt created.
The state would.
The state
would,
the
right.
state taxpayers would have to absorb all of the debt of that university at that point. If we can keep it alive, that debt still belongs to South Carolina State. The second part of it is it's a historical university, and if we kept it in place, I think it probably is a good thing for the state as a whole. But can it be saved at this point? I don't know, but we're making the efforts to try. When you have the Black Caucus vote no confidence in the leadership of the university and support an effort to radically change leadership at that university and hold them accountable, then that's a strong statement in and of itself. That made me want to vote to give them the opportunity to try to save the university. The current leadership down there had no intention of trying to do anything but status quo. When they came before the subcommittee and testified, they were asked, "Have you thought of suspending athletics for 1 year?" No, that's off the table. Have you considered reduction in force? No, that's off the table.
What was there to work with?
Nothing. That was the point. I asked directly, have they made any effort to cut employees? Well, they reduced it by 3. Their ratio of student and faculty or staff is 3 to 1. There's no other university in the state close to that. Their cost per student is $46,000 per student. Landers is 26.
Sure.
Huge difference. But short answer to your question, I'm not sure whether it can be saved at this point or not. I know it would be more costly to the state if it's not saved. I also know that every effort is being made to save it at this point. But financial accountability's got to be the big part of that equation.
Sure. Well, Representative Mike Pitts, thanks for coming by and spending some good time with us here this morning.
Always a pleasure, Ann.
Thank you very much.